Hi, welcome to episode 34 of CultureWatch Radio. I'm Andrew Smith, and with me is Bill Muhlenberg. Bill, a few of those really annoying church ministers have strayed out of their lane and gotten involved in society. What's the world coming to?
Yes, Andrew. Well, what's the church coming to? How dare they actually start acting like salt and light? I think we were commanded to do something like that by the commander-in-chief, to have an influence in the culture around us, to be relevant, to have biblical truth being applied to the situations of the day. So, yeah, we do have here in Australia three brave, I think, and helpful Christian pastors who've put together a thing called the Ezekiel Declaration, which is something I'm quite thrilled about, and obviously many others are. It's gone viral. The Ezekiel bit has to do with chapter 3 and chapter 33, both of which speak about the need for watchmen to sound the alarm, to warn the people. And the declaration has to do with, well, the whole COVID situation and some of the alarming cases of government overreach, lockdown mania, mandates of various kind, including mandatory vaccinations, vaccine passports. And thankfully, the three pastors who put this declaration together, well, they said, gee, we're not hearing many church leaders speaking out on these very important matters. There's something, every Australian is impacted with, and yet so many of the churches seem to be silent on the issue. So they put together this very important, short and sweet 5-point document, just raising some concerns, certainly about things like vaccine passports and the creation of a two-tiered society where we end up with a medical underclass, those who, for whatever reason, and it may well be good reasons, have hesitancy about the new vaccines for COVID. We could see a new kind of medical apartheid. So I've certainly been promoting this declaration, as have others, and I'm glad finally somebody has spoken out on this very important issue.
Now, we've got with us today one of the co-founders of the Ezekiel Declaration, Pastor Matthew Littlefield. G'day, Matt.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Good. Matthew, why the concern about a vaccine passport if vaccination is, as they've said, purely voluntary?
Well, I think we can see that it is not purely voluntary, and that is our concern. Already, people are having pressure put on them for their jobs, mandated by employers or mandated by various different government employers that they need to get this in certain contexts. And we see that this is encroaching, this is increasing. We've also seen overseas in countries like France and Israel and other countries where vaccine passports have already come into place. And we're following very similar trends here. And Tim and Warren and myself were really concerned. And Tim contacted me just a little while ago and said, Matt, would you like to write a letter and voice our concerns? And I was excited when he said that, because something really just needed to be said. Nobody was speaking. Well, very few. We saw maybe the occasional person online maybe saying something, but there was no voice from the church speaking. So we felt we needed to say something.
Yeah. This thing has literally only been going for a week, and to date, it's been signed by over 2,500 church ministers and 18,000 members. But then there's a bloke, famous for being the brother of our federal treasurer around the turn of the century, writing in eternity, "Beware the Ezekiel Declaration sowing seeds of vaccine hesitancy." Now, aside from his unthinking use of a euphemism for people not buying into the panic, what is he missing here?
Well, he's missing the fact that those seeds have been sown and grown for the last 18 months. And there are many people out there who are concerned. We're not sowing the seeds of anything. We're just giving voice to people who felt unheard. There are many people, I've spoken to them, I've heard them, I've spoken to others who have spoken to them, who are very concerned for various different reasons about being coerced into getting this thing. There are people who would have no problem if the coercion was not there, and the coercion is making them disturbed. So I just think it's quite hilarious to say that we're sowing the seeds of vaccine hesitancy when we clearly know that is not true. The media are already aware that there's vaccine hesitancy. The government's already aware that it's there. Everyone is aware that it's there. What we are simply doing is speaking up and saying we're not going to stand by and allow the church to say to people, you cannot come in without a vaccine. And we're also speaking up on behalf of business groups, businesses, and other people out there as well who don't want to see that happen as well. We cannot allow a two-tier society to happen, especially not without saying something. It's just not right. And so to say that we're sowing the seeds of vaccine hesitancy is just blatantly absurd, in my opinion.
Yeah, and Australia has famously been touted as an egalitarian society where everybody, no matter whether you're rich or you're poor, everybody, especially when you go down to the beach, is equal.
Yeah, Australia has very clearly, for a long time now, considered it to be the kind of country which doesn't coerce people's conscience. Now, I would actually respond to that and say we've dropped the ball on this at different points in our history. Many people will remember during World War II, we put Germans, Italians, and Japanese people in internment camps, and that is something that when people find out about, they're shocked to hear and quite ashamed of. There's the famous stolen generations. There's other times when our society has dropped the ball, and almost 100% of the time when that happens, we look back on that with national shame. And we don't always live up to our ideals of giving people the freedom to make their choices in this country. But it is something which Australians consider about themselves. And I really feel like this is one of those situations where we're in the midst of a crisis, we're in the midst of a very difficult time, and people are going way too far, way further than they would in a normal time, whether it's because of fear, whether it's because of pressure, whether it's because they're exasperated, they just want to get back to normal, whatever it is. We're starting to make some of the same mistakes we've seen our nation make in the past. And I think it's really important that Australians remember what we claim to be, a country where we do not... In fact, one of the original governors of our country, I can't remember his name, but one of the original who was taking care of the convicts very early on, he had the opportunity to set up a system when he was in control where he had complete power because he was basically the military guy, he was in charge. But he very deliberately set up a separation of power system in the Lockean mold. John Locke, the philosopher who wrote two treatises on government, who argued that we need to have a separation of powers which protects people's liberty and protects people's dignity. And that has been the model Australia has held from very early on. And to see that being completely abridged in this time of crisis is just really concerning.
If anything, a time of crisis is really just the excuse, but there must be a certain irony that the greatest loss of peacetime freedoms in Australia, and in some cases approximating martial law because we've got the army involved now, has been under our overtly Christian Prime Minister, Scott Morrison. So do you think he's going to listen to this Ezekiel Declaration?
Well, I don't know Prime Minister Scott Morrison. But what I can say, if he does read the letter or if he does hear this, that many Australian Christians are really confused. And not just Christians, many Australians are really confused. We're really concerned about the trajectory which Australia is on right now, and we're concerned about how far it has gone. And I will say this, it has been really encouraging to see him in the last week saying we have to open up, and you know, when they reach their targets, that we have to open up. But I would just call out to him and say, Mr. Prime Minister, could you please ensure that in the meantime, people's consciences are not coerced because of the current fear around this situation? I would just ask him to please listen, to please consider. We're not telling anyone what they must do on this issue of vaccination. We are not trying to tell anyone either way. What we are simply saying is there are people with genuine concerns, and we need to speak up for them. And we need to give them a voice. We need to make sure that they know that there are people defending their freedom and their genuine concerns to not be coerced to do this.
Yeah. Bill, what can we do from here?
Well, the declaration is going viral, as we said. It's well worth supporting. So certainly on my page on Culture Watch, I've got several articles on this, links to the actual document. The good folks at Cauldron Pool, another Christian website, are the ones who are hosting this declaration, so you can certainly find it there as well. So whether you go to Culture Watch or Cauldron Pool, there you'll find it. You can read it, you can sign it, you can share it with your friends, and I think it's important that we do. The truth is, politicians tend to look at numbers, they look at votes, they don't really care so much about your average Joe, but if they think there's a real push in the community for something, they may stand up, take notice. A very quick example here, Dan Andrews in Victoria has been pushing the zero case foolishness for ages now. Just the other day, a new poll came out. He's 12 percentage points down in approval rating for his handling of COVID. And guess what? The very same day the poll results came out, he changed his tune. Now he's not pushing eradication strategy. Now he's talking about, well, we got to have a low threshold. So obviously numbers have an impact on politicians. So if we keep getting people signing this and it keeps going viral, well, maybe we will wake up a few politicians and maybe we'll see a bit of change from all the lockdown mania and all the coercion when it comes to medical mandates.
Yes, he's following the science of political surveys. Always on the pulse, there's more at the Culture Watch website, and we'll see you again next week with another episode of Culture Watch Radio. Subscribe when you listen at SoundCloud, YouTube and Rumble, so you won't miss a thing.